All right. Connor is too young to remember my wife's grandfather, Pops. Pops was a plumbing inspector in Yonkers, New York. He was a wonderful little Irishman. He died in his 90s. We were all convinced that he proved the fountain of youth flowed with Schmitt's beer and vodka. But Pops used to say, hard work ain't easy. And I never agreed with that. I thought hard work is actually the easy part. The hard part is being responsible. The hard part is being the leader. And I know all of you are built for hard. Earlier this season, Meg Blanchett reminded me in an interview on the live stream that St. John Paul the Great said, and this really stuck with me, the world offers you comfort, but you were not made for comfort. You were made for greatness. Leadership's hard, and God is calling most of you to leadership. This is a particularly important topic to me, so I thought it might be useful to devote this year's talk on what I've learned about leadership leading this team in the last 25 years. Because I just finished my 25th year coaching. I was assistant coach for 2 years. And I've been the head coach for 23. And when you get to my age, you start to get a little more reflective about things. You know, the people you've loved and the people who've loved you, the things you've accomplished and the areas you've failed, the joys that came from the good choices you made and the pains that came from the bad choices you made, the adversity you faced and how you dealt with it or how you didn't deal with it. And one of the ways you also get more reflective is you kind of move from who and what to why and how. Now the why has certainly been a great source of reflection for me, especially over this past summer as I was confronting a life change. You know, my 12th kid's about to graduate from high school, and you start to question things like that. But today, that's going to have to be another talk, though, because that's a whole nother talk. Today I want to focus on the how. I want to focus on, I was asking myself, how did this happen? How did this happen? When I started around this team in the year 2000, we already had a pretty successful team by almost any standard of the time. We had already won 11 conference championships. It started in 94, 95. We were regularly hosting meets. Lots of teams in our conference don't even host meets. We were doing it back then. We were using a homegrown scoring spreadsheet that Mrs. Seltman developed. And, you know, I would hand the kid a card. The kid would bring it to the block, they'd write their time on it, and then they'd bring it back to Mrs. Seltman, who put it in this spreadsheet. But it worked. I mean, it was better than anybody else had. And relay splits, that required someone less ADD than me. You had to actually get them with a stopwatch and write them down, and I couldn't do that. We had a big team at the time, compared to most teams. We had 16 boys and 13 girls. And a lot of the names are names at that point that you recognize even today. Last names, anyway. Caitlin and Kelly Koehr. Stephanie Seltman was Charles Seltman's youngest daughter. Kathleen Lytle, her brothers owned the Bone in town. Casey Rafter, Will and John Rogers, as in Cat Rogers. Jack and Anna Murphy. Have you ever seen that portrait of Mrs. Carroll painted in Corpus Christi way up on the wall when you walk in? Jack Murphy painted that. And of course, Katie Shipko, that you've heard about. We used to practice in 5 lanes at Georgetown South. Georgetown South was in not the best neighborhood. It was an old 5-lane meter pool that they built a cinder block building over. And we had just 3 caring coaches. Katie Shipko's mom, Terry Shipko, was the head coach. And then some of us remember a guy named Dan Fluck, who used to teach at Seton. And then I was just hanging on for dear life. The team president was our very own Joanne Pretz. So all communication utilized the relatively new communication form of email, where you'd connect your computer to a home telephone line and listen to Mr. AOL say, "You got mail." But one stroke of genius had already been taken care of that proved to be revolutionary. We were already a separate 501c3 corporation, thanks to Mr. Seltman and Mr. Westhoff, believe it or not. Now, how far we've come since those days. We've developed a program that has 135 kids of all ability levels. We've coached since that time 725 unique kids. We had 92 volunteers that could commit so much time. 21 of them are coaches. We've had incredibly talented people come join us without being recruited. They came to us, and they don't even have kids on the team. We got Coach Koehr, we got Coach Palazzo, we got people like Dee Dee Ross, who hasn't had a kid on the team in 15 years. How long? Don't say it. She had a kid on the team just yesterday. But I mean, we have a program that generates over 1,000 personal records. We practice in 14 lanes at the premier aquatic facility in our area. We've hosted 207 swim meets. Most of them, big invitationals. Our smallest meet this year was conference champs. That was our smallest meet. Usually that's the biggest meet of the year. We've hosted 75, I added them up, large championship meets, and 50 of those we created ourselves. We created the VISAA Junior Varsity Invitational. We created Nova Catholics. We created the D2 Invite. And look at the technology we use. It's insane to capture times. There's no cards anymore. There's not even pieces of paper. We got 3 times shooting at the speed of light into 2 computers and a CTS timing thing. It's displaying on the board. We got the stream team that any NCAA conference championship meet would die to have a live stream, and our own video production department. And I joke we're the only team in high school swimming that has its own IT department. We've won 949 regular season meets since 2000. 57 conference championships, 10 state championships. We've raised $110,000 for cystic fibrosis. And we're a model for how to have a swim program for other schools that copy us. I mean, I go to states and people are coming up and they say, "Oh, I love what your team's doing, and I love the kids on your team, and I love how they look." So as I'm reflecting on all of that, I'm thinking, how did we get there? What did we do? Why? How did it happen? And so you start thinking of the immediate answers. Clearly, the Holy Spirit's been guiding us. It's something that works at Seton if you're open to it. And clearly, we've been open to the hand of the Holy Spirit helping us. And you certainly can't answer the question without naming countless people that have been involved. Even prior to me, Bill Shaw, Charles Seltman, Joanne Pretz. These are people that were in the 90s. Or during the formative times, I think of Chris Cook. I think of Bill Dealey. I think of Rich Lowell. I think of Pat Mulhern. I think of Dee Dee Ross. And then more recently, I think of who's like totally moved the needle for these teams. All these people did that. Now, Ashley Keeproth, Ross Palazzo, Paul Fifield, Mike and Ann Judge. And there's countless other people. I could spend 10 minutes naming everybody. There was just 92 this year. A lot of you in this room have been amazing influences. But the portion of the answer that I want to talk about today is what I call purposeful leadership. Purposeful leadership. The people that live in my house know how I feel about this. And I want all of you to know this too. I don't just think you can be leaders. I expect you to be leaders. When you pray to God to send someone to help you and solve some problem, why don't you instead, do that, but also be open to the fact that when you pray to God, maybe He's asking you to help answer someone else's prayer. And that is probably going to take some leadership. I can already hear my wife saying that some people are natural leaders and some people are not natural leaders. But that doesn't mean everyone in this room doesn't mean you can all be leaders if that's your purpose. You don't have to be the CEO or the head coach or to lead. Jesus wasn't a CEO. Jesus wasn't really in charge of anything in particular. So purposeful leadership, the point here, purposeful leadership doesn't just apply to large organizations. It like the Catholic Church or large businesses or sovereign governments or the military. It certainly applies to those. But it applies to smaller groups. It applies to schools, clubs, and associations, Boy Scout and Trail Life groups, high school swimming and diving teams, certainly. Groups of friends going on road trips to Notre Dame every year. But it even applies to the most fundamental organization in our society. It applies to our family, the domestic church, purposeful leadership. All these require leadership to achieve their ultimate mission. And that's why I so often attach the adjective purposeful to the word leadership. It's not an accident. For some people it comes kind of naturally, that's true, but the purposeful part does not. The purposeful part you have to be conscious of that person. And then you have to apply some principles, leadership principles, to achieve that. And it works, what I'm going to describe works if you're the bishop of a diocese, if you're the CEO of a company, if you're in the leadership at school, if you're a leader at Trail Life, if you're the coach of a swimming team, or if you're the father or mother in a family. So I'd like to spend the rest of the time talking about the most important things I've learned about purposeful leadership. And I hope that all of you, young and old alike, will see some opportunities to apply these principles if you seek to follow God's plan and help others follow it too. The most important prerequisite to leadership is the establishment and nurturing of a strong culture. At the root of culture is the word cult. So culture is the manifestation of what we value, what we believe in. If you want to take that cult as a metaphor, it's what we worship. So 3 points about the strongest culture. First of all, cultures develop inside some context, right? For instance, American culture developed within the context of our history, right? We had a revolution to defend individual liberties. We had founding fathers that set up a system of government that influenced our culture. Patterns of immigration in this country throughout history have certainly influenced our country. So American culture is all within that context. Well, Seton swimming, our culture has developed in the context of Seton School's culture. And it would be very difficult, as I thought about it, it's very difficult to imagine our team developing the way it has outside, disconnected from the culture of Seton School. Seton's culture is certainly Catholic, but there are plenty of Catholic schools that don't have a culture like Seton or Seton Swim and Dive. It's because the culture of Seton's grown out of our founder, who relied on her faith and hard work rather than outside professionals. It relies on a base of homeschool families that likewise rely on their faith and hard work rather than outside professionals. That's baked. That's the context in we operate. So it's entirely normal at Seton to see parents in a classroom teaching. Not some of them are actual professional teachers, but I'm fond of saying Alan Greenspan couldn't teach economics at a public school. And some of them have no educational certifications at all and do just fine teaching pre-calculus. This context has made so many things possible that even the best leader at a different place could not duplicate this. Imagine attracting parents with no swimming experience at all to coach. Right? I mean, I'm looking, obviously a couple, Dee Dee, the Ross and Ross have swimming, there's people with swimming experience, but there's lots of people with no swimming experience. Imagine having 13 stroke and turn judges willing to learn all the detail rules when, schools much bigger, Catholic schools, can't come up with anybody. And these parents, stroke and turn judges, a lot of you aren't connected to USA Swimming. You don't have big swimming backgrounds. You're kind of like a lot of you summer swim parents, right? You're just doing the Seton thing, right? I'm a parent. I'll get involved. Other schools can't even seem to come up with one stroke and turn judge. It's because their culture is relying on paid professionals. That's their deal. So it follows that in our culture, the primary people running athletic programs are not paid professionals because that's the context. Secondly, culture needs to be purposeful too. It's why companies have mission and vision statements and values. They're trying to communicate to the people in the company what's important to this company. What do we worship in this company? Well, we do the same thing. It's why we have our gems. Our gems was my attempt to combine the foundational teachings of the Catholic Church, the culture that Mrs. Carroll's created in the school as a whole, and the competitive nature of our enterprise. How do you get all of those in a unique set of values that we can say we care about, to articulate what's important? Now, I'll note, swimming and fast are two words that are used nowhere in the gems. Now, swimming and fast are clearly important to us. But the truth is, what's really important to us, if we apply what's really important to us, swimming fast just becomes a natural byproduct of it. And it's why we swim so freaking fast. Because we always say, as Coach Palazzo reminded us, swimming ain't about swimming. So it's very counterintuitive to our culture. It's very counterintuitive key to our culture that we have to purposefully communicate. Because it's easy to get focused on the obvious fact that we're a high school swimming and diving team. Right? And finally, culture needs to be lived by the leaders. This is the first, all the prerequisites to purposeful leadership. You got to live it. So we model our gratitude by trying to be joyful. I'm not always joyful, I know, but I try because I remember Thomas Aquinas defines joy as the conscious possession of the good. There can be a lot of good in my life that I'm not conscious of. So if I'm not conscious of it, it doesn't bring me joy unless I take a moment to reflect on it. It reminds me of a story my son Patrick sent me. My son Patrick has 3 young boys, and he sends me this story. He says, imagine it's Sunday morning. You've been allowed to sleep in as long as you want. You have no chores and responsibilities for the day. There's fresh fallen snow on the ground. Your mom makes cinnamon rolls and serves you breakfast. but you are almost 3, so you are blind with rage. Who has it better than us? Nobody. Who has it better than us? Nobody. Yeah, that is purposeful culture in action. And for any of you who stroke and turn judge, has any Seton kid or anyone on deck, has any Seton kid ever thanked you on deck for judging? Anybody ever thanked you guys after practice? All the time, right? Culture in action. We model excellence by always trying to get better ourselves. On the fireplace in the room in my house we call the man room, there's a little sign with a quote attributed to Abraham Lincoln. It says, "Whatever you are, be a good one." I love that quote. But if I could go back in time, I might suggest to Abraham Lincoln that I'd probably say, whatever you are, be a better one. We model excellence by continually getting better ourselves. I was looking back at old times when I was just in this reflection. Ray Bennett, Art, a lot of you know Art Bennett. One of his oldest sons went 23:48 and 50 free in 2002. That was pretty fast. Cat Rogers split 24:50 in a relay that still holds the girls' records, at least for the time being. And we didn't know anything about effective freestyle. We were teaching them to sprint efficient freestyle. Imagine. But now we know a lot more. We have improved. And the kids, the results are improving. It's probably part of the reason why the 200 free relay in 2010, we didn't teach them effective freestyle. Daniel Koehr, David Basinger did not know effective freestyle. They were swimming efficiently. Pretty darn fast, but not fast enough, apparently. You probably don't know. We have a subscription, the coaching staff, to Go Swim. Go Swim is a website and an app, and you get a daily email with stroke technique. I get it 365 days a year and have for years. And you get just a little tidbit about a breaststroke pole or whatever. It's not complicated, but you just get it in bite-sized chunks every day. And I watch our coaches. I watch Coach Judge. I watch Coach Hurley use the stuff in practice. Anyone who's been around the team, anyone who has a senior, are our meets run better now than they were 6 years ago? Yeah. And they weren't bad 6 years ago because we're continually improving. Ask my wife. If it doesn't get better, I just am grumpy. Here's a perfect example. You guys don't get calls from Mr. Fifield, but I do. And they start with things like, "I was thinking." That's a great call. There's a guy trying to figure out how to make it the next step better. That's how we're living and demonstrating excellence to everybody else. That's purposeful culture in action. We demonstrate meekness by being meek ourselves. Are we helping our opponents over the bar we raised by winning? I hate to lose. Right, honey? Yeah. But I still write about the other teams in my blogs, right? You read it. A bunch of you know the bunch of names of the girls on Trinity Christian, right? You know their names because I write about them. I reward them. I brag about Will Charlton at the Covenant School, so much so his mother took a picture with me and him. He's great. I love it, and when they read their names, that motivates them, right? I'm motivating them. I was coaching Trinity Meadowview, and I'm sitting there. What did you guys think when I got Elijah Soto and these guys, Shane Monroe, and I'm trying to coach them on how to beat you, and you're my relay team, right? That's meekness in action. That's how you demonstrate it. My wife's always like, "You're giving away all your secrets on the live stream about how you do the lineups and stuff." I don't care. That's meekness in action. Go ahead, try it. You're not going to do it as well as me anyway. Because you're not going to try as hard as I do. So go ahead, try. I want you to try. And we model sacrifice. We model sacrifice by giving of ourselves with no hope of material return. Pope John Paul the Great, I just love this one. This is another one I think of. He calls it the law of the gift. I've told some of you this before. Responsible self-giving, not self-assertion, is the road to human fulfillment. He wrote it as Carol Wojtyla at the time. His favorite line from Vatican II says, "Man finds himself only by making himself a sincere gift to others." Radical personal autonomy is not the key to happiness. Riding my Harley into West Virginia on no particular time, getting home at no particular time, is not the key to happiness. Although it sure sounds like it some days. So it's why it's so important for our culture, our purposeful culture, to use volunteers, people who are demonstrating sacrifice. So now, once we have nurtured that culture, the ground's fertile to lead. Now we're ready to lead. And we've done all this pre-work. How do you purposefully apply that culture to get maximum results for the organization and more importantly, the people in the organization? Including getting them to get up and jump into the cold waters of Freedom Center at 6:04. Well, I have 4 principles that if you follow these 4 principles or use these 4 principles, people will follow you anywhere. They'll follow you anywhere if they know you love them, if they feel like they're part of something bigger than themselves, if they feel like they are personally getting better, and if they feel like they're winning. Love them, part of something bigger than themselves, they're personally getting better, and they feel like they're winning. So I think about that. Now let's see, how have I applied those 4 principles to Seton Swimming, and you guys think about how, especially you adults, think about how you can apply it in your lives with your families and your businesses and other things. Number 1, they know you love them. So you have to lead for the benefit of others, not yourself. I used to have 10 rules, and rule 1 was always make other people successful. Imagine that every person you lead is the Christ. So it's why we have an all-volunteer labor force. It's why we don't make cuts. We take people of all ability levels. It's why we try to meet kids and their families where they are. Some are committed, dedicated athletes, and some have never participated in a sport in their life. So you got to make different demands of people in those different positions. It's why I write a weekly blog. You think I don't love you? I write a 5,000-word research paper about you every Sunday, about what you've accomplished. It's also why I'm not afraid to confront you on deck if you're not living up to the gems. It'd be way easier just to blow you off. They feel like they're part of something bigger than themselves. Shared values, a shared mission, a shared tradition are vital to a sense of belonging. It's why we constantly celebrate tradition at Seton Swimming. Coach Mike Stott introduced me to a coach, Coach Don Herdery in Oakland, California, that he writes a lot about in Swimming World Magazine, because Mike Stott's the Swimming World Magazine writer that's done a couple profiles of Seton Swimming. And Coach says, tradition never graduates. I'm like, I like that. I think I want to steal it. How do you foster tradition? One way you foster tradition is celebrating your heroes. I recall being at my son Daniel's several years ago now. He's an Army engineer, and he was graduated from engineering school at Fort Leonard Wood in central Missouri. And I don't remember what the CO said, but I do remember what he didn't say. He did not tell my kid a single story about some Army engineer in American history who is worthy of emulation. He didn't tell my kid a single story about why it's great to be part of the Army engineers. It was so uninspiring. And I'm like, I'm not making that mistake again. That's why we have an all-time greatest swims YouTube channel. It's why we have a 10-foot high record board in the gym. It's no small record board. It's 10 feet high. That's not an accident. It's why I published the all-time top 20 swims, which a bunch of you are on now this year. It's why we have an annual homecoming meet. And it's why you can't shut me up talking about Nevin Cook or Katie Shipko or whoever in my blogs or stories or wherever you get me, right? I'm telling stories about the heroes and the people you want to emulate to make you feel part of it. It's why I care so much about uniforms on deck. It's why I care so much about the way we warm up. Remember I say feet first entry, everyone into the water with military precision at the same time? It's because you're not warming up yourself, we're warming up the team. You're part of something bigger, right? It's why we line up the way we do for the national anthem. I mean, we also line up for the way of the national anthem because we need to respect this country. But a big part of it to me is we are part of something bigger. We're part of America. It's about the bigger thing. We can all be bigger. It's not just about you. You watch these other kids with towels wrapped around their waist in the national anthem, it makes me sick. Like, what? Where is your mother? Or more importantly, where is your father? Like, why is he tolerating this? And it's why we have such a big team. I had a great conversation with Kevin. Where'd Kevin go? Oh, I'm supposed to be at where Kevin is soon and get my newest grandchild baptized. Maximilian James. I call him James Maximus, though. So Kevin and I had a great conversation. He says, Kevin was talking about the legacy of every member of the team. And he said something super insightful to me. He had no idea that this was going to become part of the talk. He said, Dad, nothing happened this season that could have happened without the people who went before. For every person you don't remember their name, someone accomplished something great because of them. Even the people that never scored a point contributed to the team that has become Seton Swim and Dive today. If the whole team was Group 1, we wouldn't even have Group 1. A lot of the members of the team wouldn't even have been on the team. And there would have been no encouragement for them to be on the team and even make it to Group 1. I'm like, wow, that's pretty good. I remember, here's a perfect example. I was thinking, I remember Koehr, who I wish she was here. When she was like in 7th grade, she had no business in the world swimming 200 lengths of the pool. But she was like Addie Hadrill, right? She wasn't going to quit. She swam and finished 200 lengths of the pool. And you know what? Later Jack Gregory did it. And then Addie did it. Maybe Addie or Jack wouldn't have been able to do it if Koehr wouldn't have proved that a Wednesday, Friday swimmer can swim 200 lengths of the pool. It was normal. By the time Addie got in the water, it's normal. It's just what we do at Seton Swimming. That's an example. I wonder if Meg Blanchett would have swum if Molly or Orla or Walter didn't swim, or all the way around. Would you have swum if Meg didn't swim? Would you have swum if, you don't know, maybe not. And that would have been a shame, because then I wouldn't have been able to interview Meg at the JV invite on the live stream and have her tell me that I wasn't made for comfort. They feel like they're personally getting better. Excellence is not about good, it's about better. And we start by making people, the broad we, start by making people technically better, and then we try to make them better people. we set the example by continuously improving ourselves, as I said, because excellence is very attractive. It's why we focus so much on stroke technique. I mean, a stupid amount on stroke technique to the point where we're not even completely in shape in January. It's okay. Conscious decision, and I think it's worked pretty well. And one of the things about it is people feel the fastest way to get a kid faster is to do the stroke right. So they see results quickly. They feel like they're getting better. Hook, right? It's why we meticulously measure personal records. It's why everyone on the team has to swim the 500. Because a bunch of people on the team don't think they can do it. They did it. Now they feel like, I'm personally better. I've done something I didn't think was possible. As years go by, it's less and less impactful because everybody's figured out you're going to swim the 500 and thousands of people have done it before you, so you can do it. But, I had that figured out a long time before some of these 7th grade girls. It's why I try to get you to swim all 8 strokes, so you have more opportunities to improve. You can improve more on the strokes you're not as good at. And it's why we developed this great infrastructure we have to host all our own meets. We have to host all our own meets. We can't rely on anyone else to give us 11 meets, give us so many opportunities. We have opportunities where every one of you has, every week, you have at least 2 opportunities, and if you're leading off relays more, to get personal records 11 times a year. We do that because we want you to feel like you're getting personally better. So you know the straight line, hard work, better. Swimming, it's a very straight line. And they feel like, last one, they feel like they're winning. Anyone ever run in a military formation? I know some of you have run in a military formation. Isn't it easier to run from the front? Have you ever been in a race? Isn't it always easier to race when you're in the front? You ever swim in the front of the lane instead of the back of the lane? Well, that's a bad example because you're drafting in the back of the lane. But when you're at the front of the race, it's easier to run from the front. That's why we celebrate victories. It's why we've created so many opportunities for you to get personal records. In another sense, that's a win. And a lot of you, you're high school students. You're not always getting a lot of wins in your life. That's a win. It's why we have traveling trophies. We created Nova Catholics. We created the D2 invite. We created the JV invite for kids freshmen and below who've been overshadowed by the big kids all this time. And we have traveling trophies. Our names are all over these darn things. The D2 invite, if that was the state championship, we'd have won 20 state championships. 20. And so that's a chance. Remember after the JV invite this year? It was so cool. The team jumped in the water. The coaches jumped in the water. It's the junior varsity invite. Can you think of any other junior varsity event that elicits that kind of emotion? I can't. I was pumped for a day and a half. I'm like, this is great. We won. It was great. And I write about those victories in my blog. So it even applies to adults. You guys are part of the team. You're part of the broader team. I let you run, right? I don't mess with you. Like, you're in charge of your area. I feel like I'm winning when I'm leading this team, and I want you to share that with me. I want you to share the feeling that you're winning with the kids you're dealing with, or with the scoring system you're doing. You've made better. All the timers work awesome. I'm winning. I feel good. I'm ready to come back. This was a good feeling. This felt good. I'm winning. That's what I want. We can all win. So let me wrap up. I won't claim that I understood all that when I was 37 years old and started coaching this team. Now, I had a lot of time as a father at that point, and I had plenty of time as a corporate business executive, so I did have some preparation, but you can never really be prepared to handle 135 high school kids. Nothing can fully prepare you for that. But with God's grace, his openness to my openness, often, usually, not always, to his plan for my life, and the support of a good woman. I gradually put these leadership concepts and framework together that today I've called purposeful leadership. So as a result, you can see the team we have today is not an accident. It was with God's grace and working through God's plan. It was purposefully developed to where it is today. So I hope what you've learned something about the importance of culture. I hope you've learned something about how to instill a culture. I hope you've learned how to excite people by making sure they know you love them, making sure they feel part of something bigger than themselves, making sure they feel like they're getting better, making sure they feel like they're winning. I tell you all these things not because some of you are going to be leaders. I tell you all these things because I believe God has called all of you to be leaders. Some of you will lead big things. You'll lead big military formations. You'll lead big companies. You'll lead prestigious colleges. Some of you will lead smaller things. You'll lead schools, departments at work. You'll lead sports organizations, civic organizations. But most of you, though, are going to lead a family. It doesn't matter the size. The basic principles I've just described apply to all of those things. Your leadership should be purposeful. For Christmas 2020, I gave all my children a framed copy of my favorite quote, right there, over Colleen and Dee Dee's head. It's from my favorite passage of the Bible, which anyone who's been around me long enough knows is the parable of the talents. This is Matthew 25:23. It actually appears twice, so I just picked 25:23 as one of the two places. His master said to him, "Well done, my good and faithful servant. Since you were faithful in small matters, I will give you great responsibilities. Come share your master's joy." That is a call. That is a call to lead. And on the back side of it, can you flip it around, Carl? Gave it to every one of my kids. It's got, the paper is basically a variation of this talk, and I signed it for every one of my kids so they have it long after I'm gone to remember. Always do your best. Have the courage to lead. Thank you.